What is up, everyone? This is Fireside Yankees, your one-stop shop for Yankees content. Today, Alex and I are going to discuss a lot of Yankee topics regarding Cody Bellinger and Tatsuya Imai. John Heyman of the New York Post dropped an article regarding Cody Bellinger, the Yankees' interest in Bellinger, their interest in Tatsuya Imai. We'll discuss some other reports coming out about teams not really being that in on the outfield market. What does that mean for the Yankees and Bellinger? Tatsuya Imai is going to start meeting with teams in the upcoming weeks in the United States. So, Alex, there's a lot for us to discuss, but before we get into everything, how are you doing, and how's your Thanksgiving, man?
Doing great. Thanksgiving was great. Turkey was great. Had a smoked hickory turkey this year. Honestly, tasted like ham. Really, really freaky. But Thanksgiving was good. Hopefully yours and everybody else's was fantastic. Everyone had a safe and enjoyable time with family. And listen, baseball doesn't stop. Football, no Giants losses this week, and obviously, maybe not until Monday, but at least no Giants loss on Thanksgiving to tamper my mood. But nonetheless, I'm pretty excited to talk about Bellinger and Imai and really where the Yankees are going this offseason. I know you guys have liked the Alex and Ryan vintage special, getting back on the channel the last couple episodes. Just showing my face, letting you guys know I am still alive. I'm still here, don't worry. I pop in every now and then, but obviously, we're having a nice stretch of news right now, so I felt it was, fun to kind of get back involved. But obviously, when it comes to the Yankees, we know they have to make moves. We know, a big deal, Dylan Cease going to the Blue Jays, $210 million over 7 years, $30 million per season. That's a heavy price to pay for Dylan Cease. Now, he's a good pitcher, don't get me wrong. He's got Cy Young upside, but he's also a bit volatile. People will look at his ERA last year and say, 4.55, and say, he kind of sucks now. His underlying metrics are really good. He gets a lot of whiffs, gets lots of strikeouts. He's still a good pitcher, and I think that for the Blue Jays, that's a big upgrade for them. The Yankees need to be thinking, we need to match that. We need to get better. We know Kyle Tucker is the best outfielder on the market. We know that they want to get Bellinger back. Could that be smoke and mirrors? We'll find out eventually. But according to John Heyman, they want both Bellinger and they want Imai, and that's kind of a good compromise if you don't get Tucker. I'd say that's a fine compromise if you don't get Tucker. You get one of the best defensive outfielders on this team. You get him back. You have insurance at first base, and you get a starting pitcher that allows you to say, okay, well, now we could trade Will Bourne or Luis Hill. We could trade out of our young pool of talent to upgrade a different spot, and teams are dying for young, controllable pitching because they don't want to pay $210 million for Dylan Cease. They want a guy who's going to come in and offer you some upside for the next 4 or 5 years on a cost-controlled contract. The Yankees have plenty of that, not to mention Elmo Rodriguez, not Cruz, waiting in the weeds to join the MLB rather soon. So, Ryan, looking at the kind of outlook of this market, how the market's starting to shape up, seeing that big pitching contract, we're hearing rumors. I know for the Framber Valdez rumors are not really reliable, so I'm not going to reference them. $200 million for 6 years, I think, was what was rumored. But we'll take that with a grain of salt. And just kind of looking at how much pitchers are getting. Where do you see the Yankees right now taking a shot on Imai, and then obviously where that puts them financially for the outfield?
So Fangraphs has what I would consider extremely conservative projection of what Tatsuya Imai will get. It's projected as a 4-year, $64 million deals. I think that's selling it short. I don't think that we're going to see him get under a 9-figure deal, but I also don't believe it's going to be as high as $200 million. I think that Tatsuya Imai will end up getting a deal around $150 million for, I'd say, around 7 years. Actually, I think it's going to be similar to the contract the Yankees gave to Masahiro Tanaka after the 2013 season. And the reason I say that is because Imai is better than Kodai Senga and Shota Imanaga coming out of Japan, and was about 2 or 3 years younger, depending on which one you're talking about. A little more upside, threw harder than Imanaga, throws about as hard as Senga does with a 95.5 mile per hour fastball. And when we talk about the stuff, the sliders, it's a wrong way slider. It moves in a different direction than you would expect, and it's a pitch that's really effective. It's a pitch that generates a lot of swings and misses. There's a lot of malleability in his repertoire. You can expect him to be able to either A, add pitches, or B, refine his repertoire. He throws 3 different off-speed pitch shapes, which that's not to say that he needs to throw all 3 in the big leagues, that he needs to work on all 3 in the big leagues, but he clearly has a good feel for spinning the ball into right-handed batters. That leads me to believe a sinker wouldn't be out of the question. I know some people might sit here and say, well, he does throw a sinker, and yes, it is true. Reports have said he throws a sinker, but that is him referring to a Vulcan changeup, so it's not really a sinker. It's more of a changeup, which is why I list it as an off-speed shape, but I definitely think there's room here, Alex, for him to add a hard pitch that's moving into righties, and that on top of throwing another fastball is really important. And when we talk about Cam Schlittler's development, I think the biggest thing he did to help his career at the major league level was add a sinker, because it gave him a third fastball shape. He has the cutter that's pretty firm, but the four-seamer and the sinker, same velo, different movement. The sinker shape kind of sucks, if we're being honest. Like, I'm saying this, as I think as someone who could be objective about this. His sinker shape is terrible. I don't think Imai needs a good sinker shape to have a good sinker. I think he just needs a pitch that's different from his four-seam fastball. It comes out of the same arm slot, has the same velocity, and just makes him more deceptive. And the Yankees are the organization to do that with. So, Alex, with Tatsuya Imai, again, I project about a $150, $160 million deal, 6 or 7 years of that contract. He's 27 years old. He'll turn 28 in May. That contract would either run through his age 33 or 34 season. So, I think that's good value for him. So, Alex, if the Yankees were to offer Tatsuya Imai a 6 or 7 year deal at around $150 to $160 million, how would you feel about that? Do you also think it gets it done? What would you kind of expect Imai to get on this market?
Well, I would say this. That's essentially the Carlos Rodon contract, right? 162 over 6. And Rodon the first 2 years was really bad. And then last year was really good. So obviously he was injured going into the playoffs, and that kind of ruined the positive sentiment. But now he's going to be injured and not start the season on time after having, I think surgery on a bone chip in his shoulder. So, or rather his elbow. I think that's kind of... You look at Carlos Rodon, what we've gotten from him so far. Is that worth 6 years, 162? I'd say probably not. Up to this point, it could eventually, when that contract comes to an end, say, yeah, like we got the value out of it. Imai is an interesting kind of player, right? Because you mentioned the fastball and slider combination is really, really good. The slider tunnels so well with it. The sinker is going to get hit. It's not the best shape, but the intention of the sinker is to get more ground balls and keep the ball in the park. And I think if he can do that effectively, we're happy with that result. Imai is a pure gamble. We do not know what he's going to offer. We don't know what he's going to provide. We don't know what his ERA or his underlying metrics are going to look like. But we do know one thing. He's very young at 27, and a 6-year deal expires when he's 33 and still conceivably capable of putting together solid metrics. And his game's going to grow and develop. And if the Yankees like his raw stuff, you got Matt Blake, and that's your secret weapon to develop the rest of his arsenal and even refine his current arsenal. Now, I'll ask you this, Ryan. With Imai, we know that the NPB balls are a bit smaller, a little bit more velocity. What do you think about that? How does that impact coming to the MLB in terms of his velocity? Can he maintain what he's shown, and are you worried about that at all?
Yeah, so let's talk about what the NPB ball versus the MLB ball, what does that affect? So the first thing it affects, and the primary thing it affects, is shape. It affects shape a lot. Your four-seamer is going to lose some ride. It can have some effect on your secondary pitches. It is easier to grip. It is easier to spin, and therefore it is easier to move. It is not to the point where guys who are good in the NPB will be completely trash in Major League Baseball. But it is to say that the fastball shape for Imai will get worse when he comes over from the NPB to MLB. I do, again, believe that the arm slot, the low arm angle, that's going to allow him to be an effective starting pitcher, throwing that pitch at the top of the zone. But we'll see how that ends up affecting his overall repertoire. Now, Alex, in regards to velocity, there are some conflicting reports on that. On one hand, you're going to lose a day of rest going from a 6-man to a 5-man rotation. But on the other hand, you're going to be a starting pitcher who goes from averaging about 7 innings per start to less than that. Big league teams do not push starting pitchers to the lengths that NPB teams do. MLB teams rely on their bullpen more. They would prefer 5 great innings over 7 solid innings. That's how teams view starting pitching nowadays. Again, we can reference Dylan Cease contract, the guy who's notorious for not really getting past the 5th inning or getting even past the 6th inning, but he's very effective because teams would rather that for 5 innings or 6 innings than, again, just, solid pitching for 7 innings. So I think that there are two schools of thought there. I think Imai could actually see an increase in velocity. Japanese pitchers typically don't max out their velo. He's topped out at 99. We see MLB pitchers get closer to their max velo or sit closer to their max velo than Japanese pitchers do or NPB pitchers do. That is, again, baked into they're expected to pitch deeper into games. They are expected to be able to get through the lineup 3 times without question. In the major leagues, it's not the same thing. And people can go, well, that's because there's a lot of variables. I'm not saying this to say that Japanese pitchers have it harder than MLB pitchers. I'm saying it to say that you have to factor in every single difference, not just the one that works against the Japanese pitcher or in their favor in that same conversation. So shape, I expect to be worse. Velocity, I actually think there's a world where that gets better. So it's already 95.5. That'd be the second hardest average fastball velocity in the Yankee rotation last year behind Cam Schlittler. Can it go up to 96? That's not out of the question. That's not. And at that point, dude, that's a legit 60 fastball. It's a 60 out of 80 fastball, I think, at that velocity range. But yeah, I would love if Imai could kind of. I think I'm thumbs up on what the NPB to MLB jump would do to his stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's the interesting thing that you said. That he is capable of hitting like 99, and he's able to run it up. Like, it's not like he's unable, he just doesn't need to. That's what makes a really good pitcher, though, by the way. A guy that doesn't need to throw, like, let's look at Cam Schlittler. If he's not throwing 100 miles an hour, 99 miles an hour fastballs, he's probably not as effective, right? Imai has the capability to say, when I need to, maybe it's a 2-strike count late in the game, big at bat, so, I need to dial it up, he can. And I think that's really, really, really effective. In terms of he's able to kind of temper the velocities of his pitches to hit at his will. That's a very difficult skill to be able to control and temper your velocities and maintain command. So he's a very advanced pitcher in that way. I think the Yankees know that, and I think they love his mentality, his aggressive, kind of stature, but also at the same time, the fact he wants to beat the Dodgers. Like, he wants to go to a team that doesn't have any Japanese players, and he wants to beat the Dodgers. I know a team perfect for that. But guys, I do want to tell you right now, you're not going to get the level of information anywhere else but this dude, Ryan. I mean, this guy's just rattled off just unbelievable information and details about the NPB and the ball and how the velocity is affected. You're just not going to get that type of information. So if you guys like the Fireside Yankees podcast for all the information that Ryan does give you, make sure to hit a thumbs up below and subscribe. Like, if you're watching this video and not subscribed right now, you're just missing out on gold. I don't know what to tell you. The whole Yankee season next year, we're going to be coming out with absolute gas all the time. And we're doing live events next year at the stadium in Billy's. So if you guys are living in Manhattan or go to a lot of games frequently, you'll be able to come see us live and do some live interactions and questions and stuff like that. So really appreciate everybody that tunes into the podcast. And we're going to be bringing so much more value to you guys in the near future. But Ryan, let's talk about the outfield once again. I know it's kind of beating a dead horse. Things are developing slowly to a degree that once Tucker goes, once Bellinger goes, the whole market's going to freak out. So it's just a matter of when and how much. And Boris is leading the charge there, which is why he's on the thumbnail. And guys, if you like the new thumbnail, make sure to let us know in the comments if you like any changes that you think we can make it to it. We're trying to get your input and feedback on how to make Fireside Yankees as phenomenal as possible for your enjoyment. But, Ryan, looking at this outfield situation, you said Kyle Tucker's market is a little bit depressed in a way right now, and Bellinger obviously has a lot of suitors. But do you think that it's smoke and mirrors around Bellinger and the Yankees really want Tucker? I know they had the report came out saying he was a backup plan. I don't necessarily buy that.
Yeah, I apparently I can't point a logo at a camera. I that was really a struggle. That took a lot of brain power. But in regard to Kyle Tucker and Cody Bellinger, and I'll focus on Bellinger here because I think that Bellinger is the most interesting player on the market in the sense that he is this guy who is the quote unquote Goldilocks of the outfield market. The financial burden is not large enough to basically exclude 66 to 70% of the league, but he's also expensive enough where you have to really think about what you're offering him, and he's an impact player, but not an MVP candidate. So there's a lot of really weird things with his market, and Alex, I'm going to sit here and say it, and maybe end up being wrong. I think it's a lot of smoke and mirrors. I do. When you see the teams that have been linked to Bellinger, and Fangraphs is a really cool free agent matrix where you can actually look at what teams have been, aggregating different articles and figure out what teams have been actually connected to a player. Angels, Dodgers, Mets, Blue Jays have all been credibly linked, obviously alongside the Yankees. And the Phillies have been mentioned in that as well. Phillies and Dodgers, a lot of it is lurking, not really sure they'll outbid the Yankees, not a primary landing spot, more of a... for the lack of better words, more of a team that's on the periphery of this kind of conversation. Now, let's look at that next tier. You have the Blue Jays and Mets, who I think actually could use the player and could have a real need for an outfielder if they want to, and have had at least some interest publicly rumored in outfielder. But after the events of the last week and some of the reports, I'll give you one with the New York Mets from Will Salmon of The Athletic. The trade of Nimmo won't necessarily lead to landing a big free agent outfielder such as Kyle Tucker or Cody Bellinger. Doesn't sound like the kind of reporting you'd use for a team that's about to go all in on Cody Bellinger. I've personally heard some stuff that's kind of disputed the notion that this is a full-on pursuit and more of an opportunistic situation. The Mets, from my understanding, will be opportunistic with this. Then with Cody Bellinger and the Blue Jays, it was always as a fallback to Kyle Tucker, or if they don't get Kyle Tucker. This report from Mitch Bannon of The Athletic is very interesting. Talk of Tucker isn't quite as loud within the Blue Jays organization, so if they're not really in on Tucker, Are they really that in on Bellinger? The Angels have been linked in this. I don't want to be an asshole, but I don't really care about the Angels. They're not getting Cody Bellinger. Why would no? It's just not happening. So when we look at all these teams, no one's really that in. The Yankees are the only team that we know as definitely in, definitely willing to pay for the player, all of those things. This feels a lot like, and I'm going to compare to Alex Bregman here, the same thing. Scott Boras putting it out there. Ooh, yeah, he's getting a lot of interest around the league. From who? Who is it? Who's that team? A lot of teams are mentioned, not a lot of teams with concrete interest. So I look at Cody Bellinger and say, the Yankees are in a perfect position because we could take that same argument and apply it to Kyle Tucker, who doesn't have a real market, and the Yankees aren't even at that. The Yankees wouldn't serve as an incumbent team in this conversation. Bellinger at least has an incumbent team with serious interest in bringing him back. On the Kyle Tucker market, there isn't somebody like that. So, again, tying this all back to Bellinger, the guy on the top of the market doesn't really have a home. He's the number two, and the number two is not really getting a lot of interest across the league. A lot of teams want outfielders, and not a lot of teams are in on Bellinger. I don't think it's reflective of either player. I don't think both players stink. I don't think teams are scared of paying them. I think that the teams who are financially or have a history of paying these kinds of players don't need the player or are focused on other things. Blue Jays need Bichette. They just signed Cease. Dodgers desperately need a bullpen, and they're already, I think, at like $350 million or $360 million in committed luxury tax money. Going to be very hard for them to spend over it. I know people are going to say they'll do it anyways, but you think the Dodgers are going to spend $80 million on Kyle Tucker or $50 to $60 million on Cody Bellinger when you factor in the luxury tax and the tax that comes with it? Kind of hard to justify that type of expense. If you want to look at teams like the Mets just traded Brandon Nimmo. You thought they traded Brandon Nimmo to go, okay, the lesson we learned here is to trade Nimmo and then sign a 30-year-old corner outfielder who doesn't fit our ballpark. That doesn't make sense. The Phillies are the team that I look at and go, the fit makes a lot of sense. It is a disgustingly good fit for Cody Bellinger, but they really want Kyle Schwarber. Desperately want him back. Not sure they're going to be handing out 2 9-figure contracts in the same offseason. So it all ties back to the Yankees don't really have competition here, Alex, and I think they're in a perfect position to strike and fix their outfield needs. Alex, do you feel the same way? What is like your concern level with Bellinger leaving or your confidence meter with him coming back? Something of that nature.
You mentioned the Mets, obviously. That's the one that they have money, and I think that's definitely interesting. The Dodgers could say, let's just bring him back. Like, he's a good player. I don't think they will. I don't know if he even wants to go back to the Dodgers. We'll see. Obviously, if the price is right, anyone would. But, looking at the Mets specifically, outside of his offense, they would love his defense. I know he is a corner outfielder, but his ability, also it's an insurance policy for Pete Alonso if he leaves. So I get kind of like the defensive logic for the Mets. He's not going to be able to play center field, but I know right now you kind of have Jeff McNeil and Tyrone Taylor in left field for them. So, like, you probably don't love those two options either. I think McNeil's better as a utility piece. So they kind of need 2 outfielders. That's kind of the way I see it, unless Carson Benj is ready to make that transition, but I still think he needs a bit more time. I think that's if I'm the Mets, I'm like looking. I could see them bringing back Starling Marte. I just don't know how or where he would play because I know Juan Soto loves him. I think the Mets are a sneaky player, but not the favorites by any means. The Dodgers are obviously interesting because if they can drop the bag. But like you said, that's honestly the biggest concern I have about the Yankees in terms of Bellinger. He's a 30-year-old corner outfielder, and he's been volatile historically. So I don't want to overpay for Cody Bellinger. I would take him at fair market value, but I'm not overpaying significantly for Cody Bellinger. I think that's kind of the wavelength I'm on right now. I don't know, Ryan, what you think about that. I know you want Kyle Tucker, but I'm not overpaying for Bellinger because 30-year-old, volatile, has had injury history. That screams regression to me. If we're worried about Trent Grisham regressing, I think we also need to be worried about Cody Bellinger possibly regressing too, especially as age catches up. So, what is the most you would give Bellinger? Like, what would you be comfortable saying? Like, okay, I can justify this, I can rationalize this, but anything more than this, I think it's a no-go.
Ooh, okay, so like a max number, like final offer, walk away. Oof, that's a tough number. I would say I'm maxing out at $26 or $27 million AAV for 6 years. I'm not doing anything bigger, better, more detrimental than that because I'm going to take that number and say, show me the team who's giving you that money.
Right.
this idea that Cody Bellinger is going to hit the market. He's been rejected by the market after 23. He's been rejected by the market after 24. And now in 2025, at 30 years old, the market has decided, no, we actually do want to commit 6 years and a 9-figure contract, $27 million a year, which is valued at north of $160 million. Like that, I just don't buy that. And the reason I say that, people can go, well, he's a different player now than he was 2 years ago. No, he's not. His expected OPS in 2023 was higher. Granted, the expected OPS league-wide was higher, but his expected weighted on base average and the percentile of that was better in 23 than it was in 25. His pull rate, his pull air percentage was 2% worse in 2023 than it was in 2025. So if you're going to tell me that there's some massive change in the swing, I don't buy it. I just don't. And I apologize, I'm coming off as brash or arrogant, but I just don't buy this idea that a guy who in 2023 was a plus defensive center fielder is now a plus defensive corner outfielder. Granted, double plus defensive corner outfielder, but for the sake of argument, probably rated worse defensively as an overall player because he's not a center fielder with the same offensive profile essentially, and is 2 years older. That guy got a 3-year, $80 million contract. Maybe teams were willing to offer him a 9-figure deal. Maybe a team was willing to give him 5 years, $125 million. We will never know, but that is not a player who I expect to then get $200 million, 7 years, $180 million. I just don't see it. There's not a lot of precedent for it either. There's not a lot of precedent for 30-year-olds getting north of $150 million in the free agent market on the position player side. If you look at those guys, it's Aaron Judge, who is just a different ball player, different level, not even close. You can't even, Cody Bellinger is not even close to Aaron Judge, even in 2022 before he won, 2 more MVPs after the fact. So, again, I look at Cody Bellinger, I look at his market, I look at what he is, I look at what the player is. He's a good player. $26 million over 6 years, a year, is me acknowledging this is a good, impactful, star-level, potentially, baseball player.
Yep.
But it's short of acknowledging him as a superstar. I think that is the perfect way to acknowledge Cody Bellinger for the Yankees. But for other teams, he's not going to hit as well in Citi Field. He's not going to hit as well in Los Angeles. Right. He might hit as well, if not better, in Philly. That's what scares me about the Phillies. That, yes, Cody Bellinger's ballpark fit is actually ridiculous over there. It's really, really good fit. The Phillies not being more in kind of stuns me. Like, that is a team that I would, if I was the Phillies, I would justify paying him $28 million a year for 6 years. He is that good of a fit for them. But I think it all just ties back to there's just not a lot of, the Soto sweepstakes had the Red Sox, the Mets, the Yankees, the Dodgers, and the Blue Jays. 4 of those 5 teams are not serious, real deal players for Bellinger. One of them is not even involved in the Blue Jays and the Red Sox, excuse me. So, again, I don't think Boras is getting the market he wants. I think Tucker and his agency feel the same way. That's Casey Close, for those who don't know. And I think the Yankees are in a perfect spot to land one of them. I'd be stunned if they don't get one of these 2 players. It would take like a Byron Buxton shaking free, like Fernando Tatis Jr. is not getting traded, but like something of that scenario where you get a guy who is as good, if not better, for me to not believe that one of those 2 guys aren't a Yankee. Like I'd be truly stunned, Alex, truly stunned at this point in time.
Yeah, I think that's valid. I think either Tucker or Bellinger is going to be a Yankee now. Bellinger on like a 130 over 5 or like 140 over 6 definitely makes logical sense. Maybe have to be more like a 150 over 6, but that type of money in 6 years is going to be like a drop in the bucket for players, at that level. But like you said, he is not a great fit for a lot of the teams that would have been otherwise interested if he had more power. He's not a big power guy. Like, that's the thing about Bellinger. I know he hit 31 homers or whatever he did this past season, but he's not a power hitter. Like, he leveraged the short right porch in Yankee Stadium. Like, that is exactly what happened. But listen, spending $150 million on Cody Bellinger, bringing back Ben Rice to play first base, you're just running back the same team as you did last year at a much higher price tag, right? Now you're paying 27. I mean, I guess you were paying Bellinger 25 or 20 last year with the Cubs taking a little bit of money. So it's not that much more in terms of financial pressure for Bellinger. But Trent Grisham, you're paying 5 times as much at $22 million per season. So you're running back the same exact team, but not making any upgrades, right? That's a concern. Is that something that kind of, like, when you think about it in that respect, like, we're running back the same exact team at just a higher price tag, is that something that throws you off a bit? And not even a higher price tag, an older core. Bud Judge is a year older. Fried might, who knows if he replicates what he did last year. Like, you're just running back a team that's older now and more expensive. Does that feel like a winning mentality, or do you think they need to make another big move, a new player to fit in this lineup, maybe someone in the infield?
So I think it's a good question. I understand why fans feel as if running it back is not the best thing in the world, or is something that would actively make them less engaged with the team or whatever it may be. But it is important to note this was, again, an offense that finished first in runs scored. Like, this was not running it back is probably admitting that they're not going to be as good offensively as they were last year. They're going to regress from that number if they run it back. That's the likely outcome. But even that regressed number is still projecting to be one of the 3 or 4 or 5 best lineups in baseball. So I look at like Bellinger coming back, and I look at it and say, okay, if Bellinger's back, Judge is in right field, McMahon's at third, Volpe hopefully rebounds defensively at short, Jazz at second, Wells behind the dish, I'm going to have a better defensive team than I think I had last year. And so I think I'm going to, what I lose in offense, I gain in defense. Maybe it's not to the point where it's a net trade, but it cuts the gap in like projected. I'm trying to like say this in a way that doesn't make me sound like a complete dork. I'm trying to explain this in a way that makes sense. But the Yankees, if they run it back, would get worse offensively from last year, but likely would perform better defensively, and it would at least close some of the offense you're losing from guys just naturally getting worse from what was a lot of career years inside that lineup. There's also the aspect of, I think where they need to avoid running it back is in their pitching staff. I think they need upgrades. I think they need to make upgrades there. They didn't have enough swing and miss in the rotation. They were 16th in strikeout to walk rate. Now, strikeout to walk rate is a very stable metric compared to ERA. ERA is not a stable metric. You mentioned Dylan Cease, or we talked about Dylan Cease very briefly at the top of the show. Dylan Cease did not get paid because of his ERA. The Blue Jays didn't forget that his ERA was 4.55. They and other teams in that market were fully aware that he had a 4.55 ERA, and they did not care. They care about your strikeout rates, your ability to miss bats, and your strikeout to walk rate. And Dylan Cease is elite in terms of his strikeout to walk rate. The last 3 years, he's been one of the top pitchers in baseball in terms of strikeout to walk rate, and that's what got him paid. And whether people agree with that or not, that's up to your opinion. You're allowed to feel however you would like to feel about strikeout to walk rate as a stat, but the way that the league views it is very different than the way that the fan views it. The Yankees need improvements there. They're 16th in their rotation last year in that metric. That needs to be a top 10, because if you look at that metric, essentially what I mean by it's more stable is it's more likely they repeat that number next year than their ERA. It's more likely their strikeout to walk rate is closer to their 2025 number than their ERA is to being closer to the 2025 number. So, Alex, they need to make sure they improve that metric. That is way more important to me than trying to figure out if this offense, if that's more important to me than running it back offensively.
So let me ask you this to build off that.
Yeah.
Why is Imai such a perfect fit?
Because he's a swing and miss monster. He is the top whiff getter at Nippon Baseball League. No one, the metric started being tracked in 2014, that being whiff percentage. No one, not Ohtani, not Yamamoto, not Senga, not Imanaga, none of those dudes had a higher whiff percentage in a single season than Imai did this past year. No one, none of them. Think of all of these top guys that stayed over there, didn't come over to the States, guys who had tons of experience, guys who have pitched in that league for their entire life. None of them had a higher whiff percentage than Imai. And if you look at what Imai's body of work is, and I know it's not as impressive as a lot of the guys who've come over, but the talent is more impressive than anyone besides Yamamoto in the last 5 or 6 years. This is a guy whose fastball shape is comparable to Joe Ryan. Joe Ryan, who, the Twins are asking the moon and the sun and the whole planet for. This is a guy that throws harder than Ryan and has the same shape, same arm angle, everything, all of those things. And he might be able to throw harder. He might be able to add more to his repertoire. Alex, this is a pitcher who could be a legit, frontline starting pitcher in a rotation. He's going to be 28 next year. He's a year older than Luis Seal and Will Warren, right? That is why you need Tatsuya Imai, and that's why he's such a big part of the Yankees' plans. It might seem so perplexing to the outside fan. Why do the Yankees want starting pitching? They have so much invested in the rotation. Look at the Dodgers. The Dodgers spend over the rotation needs almost every single year because you need to keep adding. You need to keep adding. You need more swing and miss. The Yankees need a ton more swing and miss in that rotation in order for them to get to where they need to be. They need to miss bats. They couldn't buy a strikeout in the ALDS. Their pitching staff couldn't buy one. Not one. Not a single guy in that rotation missed bats in the entire postseason. In the entire ALDS. They need bat missers. Imai is the guy who would miss the most bats in that staff potentially. So, yeah, you need to bring in starting pitching. That's why Imai makes so much sense for this team. And it's why when people say you can't run it back, yes, I understand that. I get it. But that's more important with the rotation than the offense. This is an offense that slugged last year. This is an offense that Granted, you want them to cut down on swing and miss. That's fine. I agree. And I think there are ways to do that. But that position player group was so good by the end of the year. Their bench was good. They could rotate guys in and out of the lineup. Lefties, righties, didn't matter. Their defense had improved by the end of the year. The position player group should not just be judged on their offense, should be judged on their defensive merit, their base running merit. I think if they ran it back offensively, they would have a team that finishes top 10 in defensive metrics and top 5 in run scoring. And that's a group that I'm willing to go to. That's a group that can win the World Series. The Blue Jays are 2 outs away with that kind of group. That's really that's my statement on that, I guess.
Yeah, well, you see, as my role as co-host, I just ask Ryan questions, and then he gives me a very, very good response, and then I have another question I ask him, and then he goes on another good tangent, the latest one about Imai. So, listen, I fully agree. Listen, when you look at the starting rotation, you always want to be adding. You don't want to be always moving, trading, this, that. I mean, look, it gives you the luxury to say, okay, if we want to trade Warren or Heel or whoever, we now have a leg to stand on, because now you're looking at what? I mean, how many arms do you have at this point? You got Garrett Cole, you have Fried, you have Rodon. You know, obviously Rodon will miss some time, so will Cole at the beginning of the season most likely. Schlittler, you have Heel, you have Warren, you have Elmer Rodriguez on the brink, you have Clark Schmidt maybe at some point late in the year, maybe not, we'll see. And then maybe you have Imai as well. And then you have Yarbrough who could spot start. So like you have so much. Talent in that rotation. And like you said, you always want to be adding. Now the bullpen's a whole nother discussion. I'm sure we'll dive into that in a different episode. It probably deserves its own. And who's available. We'll talk about Devin Williams and all the top guns, Edwin Diaz and whatnot. But, just looking at Imai, he's a perfect fit for what the Yankees need, as Ryan just detailed for you. And, looking at Bellinger, there is a red line. There's a line the Yankees should not cross for a 30-year-old outfielder who's coming off a really good season, but historically has been seriously volatile. We love him. He's a great player. He's a great defender. We'd love to have him back at the right price. But that's assuming that the Yankees get priced out of Kyle Tucker, who somebody else is willing to give him above and beyond. The Blue Jays, realistically, Ryan, are, if they went out and were like, we're going to go get Kyle Tucker, we're going to go get Bellinger, whatever. I know Bellinger's probably not a great fit for them, but let's go get Kyle Tucker. They just got, Dylan Cease. They're going to be a dangerous team next year. Even if they don't get another big-time outfielder, they're going to be dangerous anyway. The Yankees need to know that. The Yankees need to know they're one more big move Blue Jay kind of situation away from not being favorites in the American League East and not even being close to favorites over them. So, that has to be living in Cashman's mind. I have to make that big move before the Blue Jays do, one they cannot replicate. So that's what I would be thinking if I'm Cashman. You're one week away or one mistake away. You're being too conservative away from being second fiddle in the American League East to the Blue Jays. And I don't think Yankee fans will take that very nicely.
Yeah, and I agree. And look, at the end of the day, the players we're suggesting the Yankees have a payroll of around $330 million. That's what we're essentially stating as they need to do this. We're not even mentioning, hey, they're going to need a bench bat. Hey, they're going to need bullpen support. The Yankees are going to need to spend. This is an arms race, and the Blue Jays and the Red Sox are not done. And if you look at the rosters, all three of these teams are going to open as you look at the division odds, whatever it may be. I'm sure if they were to open the season with this roster, all three of them, you'd have these two teams basically sharing the same hold of odds for winning the division. You'd have the Blue Jays at 25%, Yankees at 25%, Red Sox 25%, and then Rays and Orioles split the other 25% between themselves. Those are the three best teams in the division. It's not close. We don't really know who's going to end up winning that out of that group. The Yankees need to make sure they can separate themselves from the pack, because if they bring in Imai and Bellinger, it's going to be pretty difficult. It's not impossible, but it's definitely going to be difficult, and it's going to require some significant financial capital for the Blue Jays and the Red Sox to improve off that. I know people are going to say, well, the Blue Jays went to the World Series and you didn't, so there's a bigger perceived gap there. But I think the gap in roster quality, I don't think it's that massive, or I think entering the offseason wasn't really that big. So it's about the Yankees just doing more than the Blue Jays do this offseason. That's the bar for me. Just do more than the Blue Jays, then I think you're in a good spot. But if it's Tucker and Imai, I mean, that is where I do believe, okay, yeah, Blue Jays aren't catching that, Red Sox aren't catching it, whatever it may be. But again, it's got to be a big offseason for the Yankees, and the lack of suitors for Bellinger, the lack of suitors for Tucker, got to take advantage. I expect they might have a competitive market. We'll see what that number ends up being, but there are at least some alternatives on the pitching market that we can discuss in a later episode. But if you enjoyed this video, if you like what we do here at Fireside Yankees, make sure you like and subscribe. Turn on that notification bell to get updates and notifications on our next uploads. And you guys can also check out EmpireSportsMedia.com. That is where we have written coverage of all of our New York sports teams. And you guys can check out our social medias at Fireside Yankees. Links all to everything in the description. We'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out, everybody.
Perfect.